There we go. So as you can see, it's my face today doing a video for Man Up, not Dan Summers, because I'm sure you were getting a bit sick of his face. I'm sure you'll probably get sick of the Geordie accent at some point as well. But as you can see, I've got a wonderful lady in the room with me, Sharon Moffatt. She's a mental health trainer, first aider, extraordinaire, really passionate about this kind of stuff. Just tell us all a little bit about you, Sharon. I know a bit about you from LinkedIn. That's how we met. Why is this stuff so important, and why have you got a real passion behind you to help people?
Okay. Hi everyone. Is it morning? It's morning where we're recording from still. I don't know what time this is going live. We'll have to edit this one out and say whatever time it is. My journey of mental health has been quite a long and very changeable one, should we say. So mental health, obviously, we all have mental health. It affects how we think, feel and act. And it's never the same. So it changes all the time. And mine can be a bit like being on a roller coaster. So my story really with poor mental health started very young. I was about 9. And I struggled really severely with depression and anxiety. But the thing is, back then, no one spoke about it. And absolutely nobody recognised that children particularly could experience something like depression. So I was called the naughty kid, the lazy kid, the stupid kid, the attention seeker, which obviously only made me feel even more shame, more lack of self-worth. And then, so by the time I reached 11, I was in a bit of a crisis state, really. And my parents took me to Great Ormond Street Hospital in London, big famous children's hospital, where a psychiatrist then diagnosed me for the first time with what he described as the worst case of depression and anxiety that he'd ever seen. Now, I'm laughing almost a bit out of embarrassment. And I'll tell you why, because A, I don't believe it to be true. And B, actually, it's not true. It's just that no one spoke about it. So that was my very first experience. And then from then, I kind of went up and down the continuum of good mental health, poor mental health. And it wasn't really until I was about 38 that I started speaking about it openly. So it's been a long journey. You know, I've experienced crisis many times. And I guess my passion comes from not desperately wanting to support others and make them feel less alone, but equally to educate everyone so that stigma hopefully one day becomes extinct. And also so people actually feel more equipped to be able to reach in to other people, because there's so much, isn't there, about, you know, if someone's struggling, reach out. If anybody's on their own, you know, you can reach out to me, and all that's great, right? But there's two issues you could say with that. And the first thing is, we all say it to each other, you know, if you're struggling, reach out to me, whatever time of day it is. Well, A, are you going to be there at 3 a.m. when someone's struggling? And B, the reality is we don't reach out even to our loved ones. And I am an example of that, right? So even though I have an amazing support network around me, am I going to call somebody at 3 a.m. because I've just had a panic attack and I can't, and I'm really struggling? And in reality, I don't, because I don't want to burden them. I don't want to worry them. I don't want to disturb them. So I sit with it, and that's not good for anyone. So I believe that what we really need to be doing as a society is not waiting for people to reach out. We need to start reaching in more. And the way that we can do that is by having the confidence and the skills so that we feel more equipped to be able to do so. So is that short enough for you? That was a bit long, wasn't it?
Well, I think just that last phrase there is so powerful, that we need to be reaching in instead of people reaching out. I think exactly that. And it's hard to reach out to people and have those conversations. Like, my partner has really struggled with her mental health over the years. I've had an ex-wife who struggled with it. It's that reaching out bit can feel so difficult because, like you said, you feel like a burden, don't you? Especially if it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, and it almost feels like a lot of the time people say, "Oh, just reach out, just message." It almost feels like a little bit of lip service.
Yeah, and maybe, but sorry to interrupt you, but I think people, you read it on LinkedIn, people go, if you're struggling, you know, I'm going to make this simple for you, reach out to me. That's amazing. But are you going to be reading your messages on LinkedIn at silly o'clock? Are you going to be reading your messages on LinkedIn if you're out with your family? You know, and when somebody's in crisis, they need somebody now, not tomorrow, not when you wake up. And fortunately, we're in a place in this country where we have some amazing supports available 24/7, such as Samaritans, such as Campaign Against Living Miserably. I mean, the list could go on, and we're fortunate for that. But again, and I'm no exception here, we still feel that we don't want to reach out because there's still a bit of a stigma around that. And we think, is it actually going to help us? And what I would say to anybody really in that situation is sometimes just getting it out, sometimes just saying, do you know what? I don't know why I feel like this today. I'm really struggling. And just having somebody there to give you that space to feel your emotion is so strong, because as loved ones, you know, and I've done it myself, we hate seeing other people hurt, so we want to fix, and the way that we do that is sometimes not the best approach, by saying, oh, you just need to sort yourself out, you need to get over it, you just need to have a hot bath. And it's like, you know,
it's not a quick fix, is it? That's the thing.
no.
Yeah, and I think, like you just said there about the stigma, and one thing you said, like when you first started talking, was that stigma will hopefully one day end. Do you think it ever will? Because it's almost like it's an invisible condition, illness, however you want to call it. It's a real difficult thing for someone to see. Like if your face turned blue when you were depressed, if it went pink when you were anxious, that would be, you could gauge people help and support, couldn't you? Because that's what you'd want to do. It's like a physical illness is a lot easier to treat and support than something that's necessarily mental. So I suppose the question's twofold. Like, do you think that stigma will disappear, and what can we do to help reduce that stigma to eventually be at a position where it's hopefully nothing?
Yeah. Well, let's consider what stigma actually is really, and where it comes from. And stigma really comes from lack of knowledge and lack of understanding. It's that simple. So the more we can equip people with some different levels of understanding and empower people to learn and have more knowledge, then absolutely we can and are reducing stigma. I mean, let's face it, 10 years ago, you know, I never spoke about my experiences, and really up until relatively recently, nobody was. So the fact that people feel able to do that now shows that we have come a long way. But what I will say to you, Ian, is we are just touching the surface. Literally, we've got so much further to go. And also, in the kind of relation to stigma, is a lot of that can come from our own judgment, right? And everybody has a judgment. We're all judgmental, whether we like it or not. We're all born with an unconscious bias. We all have a bias through learnt behavior, but it doesn't mean we have to act on that. And I think that's the difference. So I don't really have a simple answer to your question. I'd love to say, yeah, by the time I'm 80, stigma will no longer exist. I'd love to say that's true, but I don't think we'll ever be able to stamp stigma out in any context completely. But we can certainly make a huge, huge impact and dent in that big, hideous word.
Yeah, and that's it. It's such a powerful word, and that's exactly why we do what we do at Man Up. It's to spread that kind of voice, spread that message, and hopefully reduce that stigma and have an impact for people. But like, one of the reasons we've kind of got on today is obviously we've got Mental Health Awareness Week coming up, which you just kind of pointed out when we had a conversation just offline. And the focus this year is about anxiety. What is anxiety? Like, what does it look like? What does it feel like? Just tell me what your thoughts are on anxiety. It'd be great to understand that a little bit more.
It sounds a bit silly asking that question, doesn't it? And I ask this question a lot when I deliver courses or present. And I always say to people, right, so have you ever felt anxious? You felt anxious, Ian?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. We've all felt anxious. It's a natural human response, right? Then I'll say, what does anxiety feel like? And we're all different, but some people might say, well, I can't concentrate, I can't sleep, I get a racing heart rate, I might feel a bit sick. For me, I call it ants in my pants, I can't sit still. Some people might feel emotional, other people might feel a bit snappy. Some people, it might go further than that. So it might prevent them from doing things that they would like to do, like leave the house, for example. Or it might create something called a panic attack, which we can also talk about. So we can all say we've experienced anxiety because it is a natural human response. Therefore, we can all say what it feels like to us. But what actually is it? And as soon as I ask that question, people quite often go, don't know. And anxiety, the most simplest way I can describe it, apart from the fact it's a natural human response, is it's a fear of something in the future, or the way I like to say it, something that hasn't happened yet. So it's created by fear and apprehension of the unknown, if you like. That's the simplest way of putting it. Now, although all of us feel anxious from time to time, not everybody will have an anxiety disorder, and they are not the same. And when somebody's experiencing an anxiety disorder, such as panic disorder, where somebody might experience panic attacks more frequently, which, by the way, most of us will experience at least one panic attack in our life. It might be generalized anxiety disorder. It might be to do with things like OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Even eating disorders can come from anxiety, could be anxiety based, right? So they are not the same. And an anxiety disorder is when anxiety gets to a level where it impacts somebody's daily life. And then obviously you would possibly or potentially receive a clinical diagnosis. So they are not the same. However, whether somebody is experiencing anxiety as a one-off, or maybe that feeling where you're waiting for a phone call from somebody. So say like you're hoping that the phone rings. If you say, for example, you've had an argument. When I was younger, right, I split up with a boy, and every time the phone rang, my heart would jump. I'd be like, oh my gosh, is it him? Is it him? Is it him? And then as soon as you picked up the phone and realised
I'm gonna show how old you are. These are the picking up ones, aren't they? This
oh,
isn't
is that
the
what? Oh no!
mobile.
Oh no! No, hang on a minute.
I could go even further.
Like that.
It's the one that you dial around and you've got to wait for it to go back. But anyway, sorry, I've cut across you there, Sharon. I couldn't resist that one.
Oh. So anyway, you're waiting for the phone to ring, and then you realise that they're telling you you're dumped or whatever, and then suddenly you don't feel anxious anymore. You feel sad. So it's a bit like that. I always use the dentist chair analogy.
Right.
Do you like the dentist, Ian?
Do you know, it doesn't bother me that much. As I've got older, it probably bothers me a little bit more. Like my sister had some real she used to get really anxious about going to the dentist. And I was one of those kids that used to sit in the chair. They'd be like, yep, done, out. And my sister would be in the chair for like 15, 20 minutes, bless her.
Oh, well, I've got all
but
my
I understand what people do. 100%.
Yeah.
Like my two stepkids, they get really anxious about going to the dentist.
So I use a dentist chair analogy, right? So I've got no fillings. I've never had anything done to my teeth. So every year I go to the dentist, I get more anxious because I think I cannot surely not need anything done. Now I'm getting older, 21 and all that. So I get really anxious. But as soon as I get in the dentist chair and they say, teeth are brilliant, everything's fine, that anxiety quickly goes. That's normal. Or don't like to use the word normal. That's usual types of anxiety, a natural human response to the unexpected or something in the future, right? But when somebody has an anxiety disorder, you get to the dentist, high level of anxiety, you sit in the dentist chair, you get the same response, teeth are perfect, you leave the dentist, but that anxiety is still there at that high level, and it can sometimes get worse. So it's like living in that state of threat all the time. And I can tell you it's exhausting. you can't sleep. When I feel anxious, I can't eat to that level. I can't concentrate. I'm incredibly restless, and it can feel very scary, incredibly scary.
Yeah, but and I guess some of the responses to that typically, I mean, I've heard them before as well, or just, well, stop worrying about it and just get over it, and you're worrying about something that's in the future that you can't control anyway, and that stuff just doesn't help, does it? Because it's almost irrational, isn't it? Like the anxiety and where it comes from. But like, how does it start? Does it almost start off as a kind of scale, and you gradually get more and more anxious over a period of time? Kind of like, it's very complicated how this stuff arises for people, isn't it?
Yeah. So with any mental illness, it has various influential factors, right? So each of us are different. So you would have individual factors. So that might be things like self-talk, for example. And then you might have environmental factors. So that might be financial difficulties, or that might be poor housing, for example. So, everybody's different. And sometimes you don't know, sometimes it's like, I don't know, right? So we're all unique. Everybody's different. But one thing that can contribute to anxiety, and I guess it relates to it a bit in context of discussion, is stress, because stress and anxiety aren't the same. However, long-term stress, so when somebody's feeling highly stressed for a long period of time, that is a huge risk factor to developing a mental illness. And one of the most common mental illnesses, or the way I like to describe it as a mental health condition, is anxiety and also depression. So long-term stress can be a huge risk factor, as can many other individual factors or environmental factors. So, and I think this is really important to maybe raise genetics here, because a lot of people talk about nature versus nurture, right? So is mental illness genetic? And I get asked this a lot. And although there is definitely a potential for a link, so there's no one gene, right? There's no one gene that says, right, Sharon, that gene, you've got the depression gene. That's it. You're going to end up with depression now. There is no such thing. However, there is a lot of research do suggest that genetics do play a part. But here's the important bit: is they're not the bigger picture. So if you have a relative or maybe a brother, sister, family member, grandparents who have experienced a mental illness, that does not mean that you've been given the same deck of cards, right? And what I find really fascinating about all of this is I have got an identical twin sister. So there's two of me, true story. So we're one egg that's split in two. I'm left-handed, she's right-handed. She got the brains, I got the looks. But
so modest.
Yeah, but she's never experienced a mental illness. So if genetics were the only issue, and genetics were 100%, that's it, you're going to experience it, then why has she not and I have? We had the same upbringing, we went to the same school, we grew up in the same environment, we had the same friends, we even wore the same clothes. So so I think it's important that we recognize that, because I think a lot of people feel very fearful that, like, oh, my granddad had bipolar disorder, so I'm definitely going to get it. That's not the case. That's not the case.
And that's quite a powerful thing, isn't it? Because if you're almost convincing yourself that you're going to suffer with the condition that maybe one of your relatives have had, that puts a lot of pressure, and it's almost kind of, it's not a self-fulfilling prophecy, because that's the wrong thing, but it kind of almost feeds back into the mental illness and kind of has an impact, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there is a nature versus nurture, and it's the same, the same with addiction. Is addiction hereditary? And I would say the same thing, nature versus nurture. If you grow up around an alcohol parent who has an issue with alcohol, then you may well learn that behavior of a coping mechanism, and therefore that learned behavior may rub off on you. But there are loads of people out there who have a parent who has experienced addiction, but doesn't mean they are. You know, I think it's really important that we make it clear that it doesn't mean that that's it. You're going to end up with it. This is simply not true.
Yeah, absolutely.
In many cases, yeah.
So kind of going back to the anxiety thing, if somebody's in a position where they are struggling with their anxiety, what can you do? Can you share some tips, some expertise, some help, something that maybe you've done for yourself that helps ease that anxiety, or something that you train people to do? Because I think sharing some of that value would be great for people that are watching that maybe are struggling.
Yeah. So everybody's different how they manage anxiety. And there are loads of things out there that can help. So, you know, the suggestions that I'm going to make here doesn't mean that they're the only ones, and it doesn't mean that they're going to work for everybody. But there is one I'm going to share that works 99% with everyone, right? But I would always say that if somebody is feeling anxious and they don't know what to do with themselves, share it with a trusted person. Doesn't matter who it is, because I really believe that a problem shared really is a problem halved. And I think that we really underestimate the value in talking, and not so much, you know, having a conversation, but if somebody is sharing something with us that's incredibly strong for them and very powerful and emotive for them, one of the biggest gifts we can give them is to listen and to be silent while we're listening. Don't give opinions. How easy is that, right? We go, right, Sharon, what you've got to do is you've just got to have a hot bath. You know, you've just got to sort yourself out. None of that's helpful. But when people say things like that, it does come from a place of love and a desperate need to fix, right? So, you know, I would say sharing your story with a trusted person, whether that's someone you know or it's one of the support lines out there, which, you know, and I've got no shame in saying I've used many support lines in my life, and I still do use them sometimes. I think that they can be amazing. But I'm going to share one thing with you that works for everybody when you're in that really heightened level of anxiety and you cannot focus, you cannot concentrate, you feel like your maybe heart's going to jump out of your chest, you may feel like you're starting to hyperventilate, which could be an indication you're having a panic attack, right? And that's called the 5 senses. So when we're in an anxiety mode, don't forget, anxiety is a fear of something in the future. We need to bring ourselves back to the present moment. And the one way you can do that works 99% of the time, particularly well with children, is called the 5 senses. So I would say if someone came to me and said, I can't concentrate, I feel really anxious, I don't know what to do with myself. Well, I would get them to walk if possible. Because if somebody feels able to, moving can be better than having to sit still. I don't know about you, and if you've ever felt really anxious, sitting still is pretty impossible, right? But you might be able to walk. But the 5 senses. So I would say, okay, look around you, tell me, vocalize it, 5 things that you can see. Now I want you to tell me 4 things that you can hear. 3 things that you can touch, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. So you have to think about that. Where, you know, if I'm sitting here now, I could find 5 things I could see, 4 things I can hear. I could probably do it, but it gets slightly harder. So I'm having to concentrate more. And by the time you've done that, you will find that you are considerably calmer.
Wow.
Works for everybody.
That's really powerful, isn't it?
It's really good. It's difficult. It's difficult when you're on your own to do it. Like for me, the best thing that I do is to recognize when I'm becoming a bit too overwhelmed, and I march it off. I literally march it off. I walk, and when I'm walking, I may then start to be a bit mindful about my walking. And what I mean by that is I might look around me. What can I see? What what am I feeling on my face? Is it windy? Is it raining? Do I feel cold? Do I feel warm? Is the ground uneven under my feet? Can I hear any birds? I start to be a bit mindful with it. And for me, that works really well if I get it early. You know, by the time, if I get to a point where I'm in a panic attack, which these days fortunately doesn't happen very often, then the 5 senses can work every time. Because, you know, like I said, most of us will experience a panic attack at some point in our life. The average panic attack will last for about 10 minutes, but they can last as little as a couple of minutes, but they can also last hours. Some people might come out of a panic attack and go straight into another one. And you know you're having someone's having a panic attack because it is very sudden. It comes on very quickly. And it really is categorized with pain in the chest, shortness of breath, changing. You might feel like you start sweating, you might feel sick. Some people feel like they're going to pass out. Some people, it can be incredibly scary and might say, I think I'm dying or I'm having a heart attack. But panic attacks aren't gradual. They come on very quickly, and often they can happen without any warning. So people don't see it coming.
So there's no kind of typical build-up or something? It's
not necessarily. No, not necessarily. So, you know, some people, this is where language can get confusing, because some people might say I'm having an anxiety attack. And you think, okay, what is the definition of an anxiety attack? Well, an anxiety attack is generally what you've just explained. It's that build up of anxiety. And it's a bit of an American term, anxiety attack, because some medical journals don't recognize that as anything. But a panic attack will come on very suddenly. And it's caused, actually, and this really helped me to understand what causes it, is a buildup of adrenaline. So you've been walking around in a heightened state of threat the whole time. So you feel under threat. You're in that heightened state of fight or flight. That adrenaline's pumping for a long period of time, and your body has got to get rid of that adrenaline. And the way it does that is by creating the body to go into this panic attack to release that adrenaline. So once somebody has experienced the panic attack, and once that has passed, it is knackering. It's really tiring. And a lot of people, and I think I just feel exhausted. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because that's your body's way of getting rid of that anxiety or that heightened adrenaline.
Right. It's quite interesting. It's interesting hearing it, and like that, like you said, that 5 steps that you can take to kind of 5 senses to kind of bring yourself down and kind of calm down. Like, even as you're talking through that, and I'm kind of playing it through in my head, without having anxiety, I almost start to feel that little bit calmer, because you become a little bit more present, and you're kind of aware, and you're aware of your surroundings. Like when you were saying, look at 5 things, find 5 things you can see. I'm kind of looking around thinking, like, what can I see? It's really powerful stuff. So are there things that you do, like, to almost manage this on a daily basis? Because I've certainly, with my experience of being around people that have struggled mentally, there are things that can be done almost as a daily management, but there are going to be times when none of this stuff works. Like, do you notice a difference when you're a bit more maybe mindful every day, when maybe your diet's right, or maybe you're doing exercise? Because I know you're big into keeping fit and kind of keeping yourself healthy as well.
Well, yeah, I am, but I'm like everybody else. I go through waves. So you know, my background's in personal training, but you know, I exercise for my mental health. But you know, everyone knows that exercise is good for their mental well-being, right? But have you ever tried getting somebody who is struggling so desperately that they can't get out of bed physically to go for a run or go for a walk? It's like, I can't even brush my teeth, you know, because when somebody's experiencing, say, depression, for example, dopamine, which is your motivator, your motivating neurotransmitters, already hugely depleted. So you're asking it to go above and beyond just to get up and exercise. So it can be incredibly challenging just to get started. But exercise does help, because for me, exercise doesn't just improve my mood, it improves my self-confidence, it improves my sleep. I generally eat a bit better when I'm exercising. So exercise is really powerful. But, you know, as a personal trainer, somebody that was a personal trainer and still does, you know, I have a few clients still every week. A lot of people will say, well, you know, what does that mean? What does exercise mean? Does that mean I've got to do 500 burpees in 6 seconds and run 10 miles? And I say, you know, exercise is doing more today than you did yesterday, putting one foot in front of the other, raising your heart rate, even if it's just slightly, and moving. And for a lot of people, that's, you know, that's way more than they'd normally do. So it's about activity, and it's about activity that feels good for you. You know, there's no point in me saying I'm going to do a 10-mile cycle if I don't actually really enjoy cycling. Try and find something that you enjoy. You know, I love walking. I run, but I also really love walking because I feel I can march it out when I walk. I can you see what's around me, you know, a bit nosy and look at the houses. Oh, that's a nice house. Oh, I like the look of that. That's a nice. Oh, what car's that? Oh, yeah. So
I thought I saw you peeking through my windows the other day when you walk past.
Yeah, it wasn't me. I'm usually like that. What are they cooking for dinner? Yeah. Like that. Can sniff it out. So yeah, I like walking very much. But if you said to me, "Oh, Sharon, have you ever thought about doing a triathlon?" I'd be like, "No way."
Right.
You never. So it's about finding something that's right for you, for sure. But I think we need to allow ourselves to feel emotion, right? You know, the medical model, in a way, has led us to believe that everyone needs fixing, and every behavior or experience that we have in our lives, you know, we need to fix it. And actually, we don't. It's normal to feel ups and downs in life. We all feel it, and we should be allowed to sometimes just feel comfortable to sit with those emotions and just let them pass. Can I just say, Ian, talking about managing anxiety and breathing,
Right.
breathing can help. So something called box breathing, which
Yes,
is where
I've heard about this, but haven't done the research. I kind of looked into it. It's something that
it's very simple. You just simply breathe in through your nose for, say, 4, hold your breath for 4, slowly breathe out for 4, and then hold for 4. Now, some people might do it where the numbers get bigger. So you breathe in for 3, hold for 4, breathe out for 5 or whatever. So that can be really beneficial. What you don't do, which is what my mum did to me the very first time I ever had a panic attack, was put a paper bag over my face and go, breathe in and out of that, breathe in and out of that. Don't do that. Whatever you do, do not give someone a paper bag to breathe in and out of. Why do you think that might be, Ian?
It's just going to reduce the oxygen, surely. It's just going to make it worse.
Yeah.
Like you need the oxygen pumping through your system. That's
absolutely.
kind of what I would think.
Yeah, you're right. So originally it was, you know, because you would see the bag blowing up and reducing, so it would give you a focus. But actually, you're right, it restricts oxygen flow. So yeah, do not do that. And some psychologists will argue that actually breathing techniques can make somebody feel worse. So my guidance would be, if it works for you, who are we to say don't do it? But if I was supporting somebody else that is experiencing high anxiety, I might ask them if they, you know, have you experienced this before? What helped you last time? But breathing might not be my go-to. You could even say, like, count the seconds on a clock with me. You know, talk about something completely differently. Do not ask somebody when they're on a heightened level of anxiety, why are you feeling anxious? Because what they're going to do, they're going to think about what's making them anxious even more, and that's going to make them feel more anxious. Don't ask somebody, why are you feeling so anxious, when they're in that heightened state. Make them feel worse.
I've been guilty of that.
So have I. We're all human, like, because you want to help somebody, you know, what's making you feel like this, and it's like, you know, it can make.
So what would you suggest then?
Worse.
What would you suggest rather than ask what's kind of what's making you feel anxious?
So if somebody is feeling highly anxious, you want to bring them back to the present moment and make them let them know they're safe. This will pass. This absolutely will pass. Whether you're having a panic attack, you've been feeling anxious and overwhelmed for a long period of time, whether you're somebody like me who's been living with a mental illness of depression and anxiety since she was 9, you don't feel like that forever. It does pass. So, we need to be showing people empathy, listen, allow people to sit in silence. And, one of the most powerful things, I think, you need to say what feels right for you, though, of course. You don't want it to be scripted. But I sometimes think one thing that always helps me is when somebody just says, you'll be okay. You'll be okay. What might help you right now? What do you think might help you? Has anything helped you before? Is there anything that's worked for you before? Don't expect immediate responses, and don't expect somebody to be like, oh, I feel much better now. When we're if we're going to support somebody and reach in and say to somebody, are you okay? Or, probably not the best question to ask, but, how are you feeling today? Be prepared to listen to the response, and be prepared that somebody might say, you know what, I'm really struggling. We need to get beyond the, hi, how are you? That kind of small talk, right? Of, hi, how are you? Yeah, fine. We don't even wait for the answer half the time, do we? We're off up the road. All right, how are you? Yeah, great. You haven't even heard the answer. So, be prepared for what the person might say and stay calm. Don't start panicking ourselves. Easier said than done sometimes.
Of course it is, absolutely, especially when you've got that inherent kind of part in you that wants to fix and help things. Like, I'm the worst for it. Like, I want to try and fix stuff. Like, my career is to fix things, and it's like when I hear those things about being anxious, and some of the things that you've just said there have really resonated with me, because I've been guilty of them. Like, what's making you anxious, or how are you feeling? What can I do to help? All that stuff. And then certainly the one thing for me was just listening, and being able to just sit down and say, don't need you to fix anything. I just need you to listen. And that in itself makes a big difference. And like you said, having a conversation with that trusted person.
Yeah. There's an amazing video that I share on nearly every single teaching I do. And it's by an American psychologist called Brené Brown, Brene Brown. And the video is called Vulnerability. Oh my gosh, my mind's gone blank. Empathy versus sympathy, or sympathy versus empathy.
Right.
Gosh, you can tell how old I am, can't you, when you start forgetting things? I'm not of an age where I get hot sweats at all. And it's literally 2.5 minutes. It's a cartoon, and it's so incredible. And it's about the difference between somebody just allowing someone to have their feelings and say, you know what, I don't really know what to say right now, but I'm just so glad you told me, and I'm here for you, rather than, well, do you know what, at least you got a roof over your head, at least you got a job, because
could be worse.
Nothing ever gets solved by it, at least, right? And we're all guilty of doing it. I am too, Ian, of saying it because we don't know what else to say, and we feel that if we don't say anything, that's not good either. Sometimes we don't need the answers, we just need to be there. Great video. It's just over 2 minutes. Brilliant.
It's great. So much stuff's come out of that today, and I'm sure that as people listen to this will watch the video, they'll use the 5 senses, they'll hopefully listen a lot more to any partners or love people that are kind of struggling. Is there any closing comments that you want to make, Sharon?
I would just like to say, well, thanks for having me, especially with the title like Man Up. I'm like, oh God, I mean, I am 6 foot, but I don't think I could quite pull off pretending to be a man. You never know. Sometimes I do get called sir. And I would just like to say that anybody that is struggling out there for whatever reason, I know you hear this all the time and you'll be thinking, yeah, but it doesn't help. You really aren't alone. This does pass. It does. And do not feel that there's no help out there and nobody cares, because there are people out there that care, and there is so much help out there for you. You just need to reach out and take it. Google it. You know, that's the simplest thing. There's a great website called Hub of Hope, actually. Just sorry to go on. Hub of Hope is a website you can go on and you can put in your location and what you're struggling with. So I might go anxiety, panic attacks, addiction. And it will come up with a directory of supports available, not just in your area, but nationally, that can support you. Now, some will be private, some will be NHS, some will be charitable, but it's a full directory. Reach out. It doesn't matter. Even if you think that's not worked for me, it's not that something's not working. It just means you might not have found what's right for you. But whatever you do, do not think that you're on your own, because I promise you, you're not, and it doesn't define you. Regardless of your struggles, you can go on and do incredible things. So yeah, that's it. Leaving it on that note, Ian.
So powerful. Cheers, Sharon. Thank you very much for having you on.
Thanks for having me.
Right, I've just clicked the end button.
Da, da, da. How's that?
Awesome. Really good. Honestly, that was so good. Thank you for having